Welcome, everyone, to a very special Center for Responsible Business Rudolph Peterson Speaker Series by the title of Redefining Responsible Business, Past, Present, and Future of the CRB. I am Robert Strand, and I have the incredible privilege to be the Executive Director of the Center for Responsible Business. All right. Not even a family member. So we're off to a good start here. And I've been in this role for going on 5 years. And today we are thrilled, sincerely thrilled to be joined in the room by leaders and alums that have laid the foundation of the CRB's successes as we celebrate 15 years of creating impact. Now, our mission at the CRB is to develop leaders who redefine business for a sustainable future. And we put, as you can see here, we put students at the center of absolutely everything that we do. Now, as part of reflecting back on the last 15 years, we made a short video, and we wanted to share it with you here today for the first time publicly. I hope you enjoy it. The challenges of sustainability demand a new narrative for business and a new kind of leader, able to work across boundaries to achieve social and environmental impact. The Center for Responsible Business exists to develop leaders who are redefining business for a sustainable future. Building on more than a decade of research, teaching, and engaging with business, we educate and provoke thoughtful debate. By connecting students, businesses, and faculty to mobilize the positive potential of business, we aim to create a more equitable, inclusive, and sustainable society.
Responsible business is a strategy. It's the art and science of doing well by doing good.
The CRB's mission is to develop and support the people who are going to lead business to become more and more responsible from the inside out.
Haas was really the only school that I found where you really saw authenticity with how they connected both social, environmental, and business issues all together.
What I see in CRB students is that fire in the belly. They're out there challenging the way that things are currently done.
When we engage with our students, we're trying to find what they're passionate about and what they're good at, and trying to help them integrate aspects of corporate responsibility and sustainability into a whole bunch of different functional areas.
Responsible business is the only kind of business that we're going to have if we're going to have a world. You know, we have real business problems, and we use this work and we put it into action. You know, it's not just here today and we walk away. We actually take this work and we turn it into something that happens in the world. The fact that you guys are on the forefront of the thought leadership here, and that we'll use this information, very deeply use this information for our business, I think is super exciting to all of us.
I want to see a world where every product is measured for its social and environmental impacts.
As sustainable finance and impact investing initiatives gain traction, I hope to contribute to the field of social innovation and venture design, where we can structure more modern business models that both deliver profit and social and environmental impact.
If we can help put people in companies where they're loving what they do, they're doing some good in the world through their company, that's the kind of change that we're creating here at the Center for Responsible Business.
We feel our work is more important now than ever. As we look to the future, the Center for Responsible Business will continue to act as a platform to encourage critical discussions and debates about the topics of responsible and sustainable business and their broader societal implications, while always placing students at the center of everything we do. That was nice. That was very nice. Now, since the beginning of the academic year, we've been releasing stories of impact as part of our 15th anniversary celebration of the CRB to highlight the students, people, programs, and partnerships that are the essence of the CRB. These stories highlight the groundbreaking work of former students like Linnell Cameron, who wrote the first business plan for the Center for Responsible Business almost 20 years ago here at Berkeley Haas, when she was 8. Jeff Denby and Jason Kibbe, who are challenging traditional apparel supply chains and demanding that the industry does more and does better. Adrian Rodriguez and Kai Hinson, who through the Patagonia case competition have been able to redefine the potential for regenerative agricultural practices and create an implementable plan with industry transforming potential. Blue Forest Conservation, founded by 4 Haas alums, including CRB fellow Chad Reed, is changing the way forest management is funded. Seeing a desperate need to better fund wildland management, Blue Forest created a new funding model through their forest resilience bond. Now today we'll hear from a number of outstanding alums who have had a transformative impact over the last 15 years. Each of these speakers will be introduced by the Dean or CRB Executive Director who was at the helm during the alums' time here. So today is a bit of a reunion also. I do regret to say that the founding director of the Center for Responsible Business, Kelly Mcelhaney, unfortunately fell sick today. She'll be okay, but she's not feeling well, and she sends her regrets. And we honor her here today as the founding director and all the work she did. And so, Nikita, you're stuck with me offering an introduction for you. My sincere apologies for that. Before I turn it over to Interim Dean Laura Tyson to kick us off, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the many supporters and donors whose partnership have been crucial to the CRB's existence. Thank you. The CRB is an entirely self-funded center, and we rely upon our partners and supporters to exist. And we need your support more now than ever. So central to our 15th anniversary celebration of the CRB, we're working to cultivate a suite of individual donors we call CRB sustaining sponsors. Now, the associated give is $25,000 a year for 3 years to ensure we keep the lights on at the CRB to continue to do what we do. And a multi-year commitment of this nature helps us to ensure the financial stability of the CRB beyond just current year. Now, some of our supporters are in the room here today who are already CRB sustaining sponsors, and I won't call you out other than to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And here's the ask, because we need 8 more throughout this academic year to sign up to be a CRB sustaining sponsor to ensure our financial stability. And my humble hope is that a few of you today will feel the impact that the CRB has had over these years and say, I want to support that. And if you do, please reach out to myself or one of my good colleagues from development. Elizabeth, would you kindly stand up? This Elizabeth and other folks from development who may be here. Jake, right there. Myself, Lisa, right there. Our good colleagues to help us make sure that we can keep doing what we're doing here. Okay, a final housekeeping note. We ask that you please submit any questions that you may have throughout the talk via Twitter at this handle, #CRBBeyond15. Because each speaker will present a short TED-style-like talk, and at the end we break for networking. And I'll pose a few of your questions that you've submitted via Twitter to our esteemed guests. And I recognize that if you are of my age or above, maybe you don't use Twitter so much, so look around for a savvy person with their phone out and ask them if they'd submit it on your behalf. We're collecting these questions here. And so with that, Dean Tyson, I welcome you to the stage to introduce our first speaker. So please, everyone, Interim Dean Laura Tyson.
So it's a great pleasure to be here today. It's a great pleasure to be here today because for me, when I was the dean between 1998 and 2001, several of the initiatives that I worked with, because of the energy and vision of the students, those initiatives included the steps that we took that ultimately resulted in the creation of the CRB, and that also ultimately end up in creating the Global Social Venture Plan competition. So these are things that I'm very proud of in my life as dean. They would not have happened without student leaders and student pressure to say, let's do something different let's add some new things to the Haas School. So I have the honor of introducing Linnell Cameron, who was one of those students who really, because of her commitment to sustainability, not even a term widely used then, corporate social responsibility was more the term used then, helped to work with me and others at the school on the first steps to creating what we have today. So let me just start with with Linnell's brief history. She's the Vice President of Sustainability at Autodesk. She's the CEO of the Autodesk Foundation. Before joining Autodesk, she spent 7 years at Hewlett-Packard developing, implementing their sustainability practice. Under her leadership, Autodesk has won numerous awards for sustainability, for philanthropy, proving over and over again that companies can do well by doing good. They can do well with their brand and their customers. They can do well with their talent. They can do well with their shareholders. So we have the corporation, Autodesk, showing that doing well and doing good are intermeshed. The foundation has granted over $15 million in funding, software, and training to entrepreneurs and innovators to create innovative solutions to the world's most pressing social and economic challenges. Now, you've heard that Linnell's commitment to sustainability and social impact is longstanding as well as deep. She did indeed write a class, paper, a business plan advocating the creation of the Center for Responsible Business. She was involved in the interviewing team for the first executive director, Kelly Mcelhaney. She also, that wasn't enough. I mean, she was finishing her MBA degree. She was helping to create the design for the Center for Responsible Business. She was actually also working on the establishment of a new course on social ventures taught by Will Rosenzweig, who's also with us today. And she was instrumental in helping create the Social Venture Plan Competition, which became the Global Social Venture Plan Competition, which also still exists today and is the longest global competition in social ventures around the world. I was honored to be able to work with her in the process of building the CRB and in the process of launching the Social Venture Plan Competition. You heard that it is important that we engage donors. These activities would simply not have been possible without attracting donors. And my role as dean to help facilitate these designs in new institutions was to go out and find some initial funding. We found some initial funding from Goldman Sachs Foundation for the Global Social Venture Plan Competition. And in one of my highest profile activities as dean, we found some competition from Paul Newman, the actor, on the Newman Foundation that led to the first funding for the Center for Responsible Business. So you can see that Linnell has had a long history. I've had a great honor of working with her. She's a real pioneer. She's a real pioneer. She's helped define the field. She's helped define the corporate practice in two world-renowned institutions, Autodesk and Hewlett-Packard. She's helped build the foundation of lasting programs here. I'm just going to end with, we have now enshrined at the school for defining leadership principles. It's my view that these principles have always been part of Haas culture, and what we have done was we found a wonderful way to articulate them, but they define our community, and they define Linnell. These were all clear in what she was when she was a student here. She is confident, but without arrogance. She always questions the status quo. I mean, she is a student always. She's always taking on new challenges and learning something new. And obviously, she thinks way beyond herself to build a more just, a more equitable, and a more sustainable future. I couldn't be more honored than to introduce Linnell to kick off this wonderful celebratory event. Linnell.
My goodness, I don't know if I can add to that. Thank you, Laura. It is truly an honor and a privilege to be back here on campus celebrating what you all, many of you, helped to create. So it's a true honor. Now, when Robert invited me to come speak here, he asked me to talk about my experience at Berkeley before there was a Center for Responsible Business, and to talk about how the field has evolved over the years. And I'm going to do that, although Laura covered most of it. But why I really wanted to come back here today is to talk about the future of business, and will it save us or destroy us, and our role in that future. When I came to business school more than 15 years ago, I had a belief in the power of business. But today, I have absolute certainty that business is the only thing that is going to be able to solve the challenges that we face today. And we have to get the next 15 years right. So I'm going to take you on my journey, not because my story is special or novel. We each have our stories. But because understanding who you are in this world, what you bring, and what you want to create is more important today than ever. So for me, I grew up backpacking with this family, the middle child of three. Both of my parents were educators, so we had the summers off, and they took us into the wilderness backpacking. And they took us into the mountains to teach us about the planet and our place on the planet as stewards. But I think the real reason my parents took us into the mountains was to connect with each other in conversation. And my dad's favorite topic and question he asked me was, what do you want to contribute? Now, this question continued all throughout college. Every single summer and vacation I came home from Middlebury College, my dad never asked me, what do I want to do or be when I grow up? He asked me, what will I contribute? This was a heavy question for me back then, but I've come to realize it's perhaps one of the most important questions anyone has asked me. So at the time, again, more than 25 years ago, when I was 8, if you wanted a career in impact, the nonprofit sector was a likely choice. So I spent the next 10 years working at the intersection of people and planet in mountain regions around the world. I felt like I'd found my path. Until this book, The Ecology of Commerce, literally arrived in my mailbox and stopped me in my tracks. Back in 1994, Paul Hawken wrote that business is the problem, but it also must be part of the solution. So I devoured this book one weekend and literally applied to business school the next. And I will say, going to business school as a nonprofit girl was a pretty radical idea back then. In fact, my friends were deeply concerned that I was going to the dark side. I was selling out. But of course, soon I arrived here at this beautiful campus at Berkeley. This was a brand new building back then. And other than a barrette business when I was 10 years old, I knew nothing about business, only knowing that I needed to immerse myself in it. And of course, what I found here probably won't surprise you. I found a thriving net impact chapter. I found entrepreneurial classmates with huge ambitions, like starting the social venture business plan competition. I also met people like Will Rosenzweig, who agreed to teach a new class on social venture entrepreneurship, even if it meant teaching on Saturdays until we could prove enough demand. Thank you, Will. I was thriving at Berkeley, but the thing is, there was no Center for Responsible Business. There were, however, faculty and administrators like Laura Tyson, who will always be Dean Tyson to me, who took time to listen to student ideas and create the conditions for them to thrive and grow. I was also fortunate as a student to have a chance to work with Chris Rosen. I don't know if she's here today. I haven't seen her. Okay. And she was a faculty advisor for the Independent Study Project, where I wrote a business plan. I was trying to assess whether or not, it really was a question, responsible business could be a differentiator for Haas. Through the process, I learned to write a business plan. I learned the art of being politely persistent. I learned how to influence without authority. And I was thrilled to be on the interview team later to interview Kelly Mcelhaney, who unfortunately is not here, but came to lead and build the center that we're celebrating today. So I had an idea, which is important, but it was Haas that created the condition for these ideas to flourish and grow and gain traction. So with my MBA, I set off to apply for jobs. And during this process, I was fortunate to meet back up with Paul Hawken, who I didn't actually know at the time. But I said to him, I read your book, I went to business school, and I'm ready to take on the corporate sector. I think I really said that to him. I said, what advice do you have for me? And his advice was quite simple. He said, go where you're respected. Don't go bang your head up against a wall. Go to a company that's ready for Linnell. Like my dad's question, some of the best advice that I've been given. So I landed here at HP, a huge company, but with a deep ethic of citizenship and responsibility, much like I had found here at Haas. So at HP, we obviously had a sprawling footprint. We had a complex supply chain. The opportunity for impact was immense. And this proved to be an excellent training ground for me in corporate responsibility. We launched a first citizenship report back in 2001, before most companies were doing it. We implemented a supply chain code of conduct, changed the way products are designed and made. Much of this probably sounds normal today, maybe even boring, but that's the point. That's how far we've come in the last 15 years. But there was a key person at HP who showed up early in my tenure there as a mentor, an advocate, a cheerleader, a support system for me. Many of you may know Barb Wah, who's now here at Berkeley. Barb made it her mission to find and amplify positive deviance. These are people who are buried deep inside organizations trying to swim upstream, change the system from within. Barb taught me that change happens incrementally. 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. Your work matters. You're having an impact, she'd tell me. Play the long game. Like at Berkeley, Barb created the conditions for my ideas to gain traction and take off. Hopefully you're starting to see a theme here that I'll come back to. So while I was at HP, I realized that many of the challenges that we face are actually the unintended consequences of past design decisions. I probably shouldn't have advanced this yet. And I'd been hearing about this company called Autodesk, a company, relatively unknown company that makes software used to design and make quite literally anything on the planet. So if we could embed sustainability in the software, it would be easier for anyone to make better decisions about everything. So, like a typical MBA from Haas, I wrote the company a letter, which was fun to actually find the other day and take a picture of. You can see my handwriting. And I said, Autodesk has an incredible opportunity to capitalize on top-line growth opportunities, right? Moving even beyond the idea of corporate responsibility. So at Autodesk, it's a relatively small company, especially compared to a company like HP, but with ripples of impact, outsized impact for this small company, because we make the software that's used by millions that then impacts the lives of billions of people. So I loved this idea of possibly even having a small impact to transform entire industries like architecture, manufacturing, and construction. And there's certainly a lot that I'm proud of at Autodesk. I'm proud that we have a science-based climate target we set 10 years ago. I'm proud we power our operations with 100% renewable energy. Proud we have employee impact programs for thousands of employees who today demand to create impact and have a higher sense of purpose when they come to work. And I'm grateful that I have had the opportunity to work with entrepreneurs and innovators around the world who are truly catalyzing new industries and changing the game. I'm honored to have a CEO and executive team behind me supporting the growth and the launch of the Autodesk Foundation to actually invest in entrepreneurs who are having scalable impact around the world. Organizations like the UN High Commission for Refugee that's designing pop-up cities to house millions of refugees. This is the kind of positive, scalable impact that drives me. And I'm really fortunate at Autodesk to have a long leash, to be mentored by many different colleagues, past CEO or current CEO, a manager, Chris Bradshaw, of many, many years. I've been coached to survive and even thrive inside a company that's undergoing its own transitions, shareholder activists, leadership changes, a whole business model transition. Yet even still, I wondered, was I really having the impact that I came here to have? Was I actually changing the trajectory of some of these industries? After all, many of our largest customers still regarded sustainability as a thought leadership idea, not necessarily the business driver. Fortunately, about this time a few years ago, many different companies, especially overseas, started to embrace the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I liked your pin. And many more companies are setting ambitious targets, tying executive compensation to them, and driving action, even setting up board-level committees to address sustainability. So I felt perhaps the time has finally come. The time to actually work with some of our largest customers to help them win with sustainability. Because if our customers actually win business with sustainability, then finally we could get the flywheel to spin. So this part of the story doesn't actually have an ending because I'm in the middle of it. And I've learned that change takes a long time. But we are working closely, recruiting allies, finding positive deviants, working with our CEO and CMO to build impact into every single aspect of our company. And this brings me to today and to the future, what we're up against and what it will take for all of us. And I realize in thinking about this talk, if I were a student today at Haas, I'd probably be doing an independent study. And I'd be designing something that might be called the Center for Climate Innovation. Why? Because like Kevin Starr, I believe that climate change is the one thing that threatens to undo much of our progress to date. Just want to let that sink in. It's an uncomfortable idea still. Climate change is the one thing that threatens to undo most of our progress to date. It's also the one area where a tech solution could make a huge difference. It's also a massive business opportunity to design a low-carbon economy. Now, we have certainly made incredible progress over the last 15 years. I am so thrilled that we have a Paris Agreement with more than 200 countries as signatories. I'm thrilled that California hosted the Global Climate Action Summit, bringing together global government leaders with the private sector, declaring that we are still in. And I'm proud that more people are beginning to understand climate as a human issue, a human health issue, an equity issue, not just a distant existential environmental threat that it's been perceived to be for many years. So progress is happening for sure. And yet here's the thing, we are not close to where we need to be. It seems painfully obvious speaking to this audience who just experienced the realities of fires burning north and south of us. But our time is up, and here's where all of us come in. When I look into the future, 30 years from now, there'll be 10 billion people living here on the planet. 75%, most of those people will be living in or near cities, and 5 billion people will be in the global middle class. Expectations of cars, computers, all the goods that we take for granted in this country. And powering those lifestyles is going to require twice as much energy as we currently produce, which we know has to come from clean sources of energy. This is the future we're up against. And yes, it certainly sounds daunting, But here's the thing, it is the most important design challenge we have ever been given. So how are we going to get there? Many corporate leaders today are talking about the future of work. The fear that automation, technology, AI, robots are taking away jobs. And that's certainly, there's some truth to that. Many jobs are going away, other jobs are being created. But here's the crux. It's the very same automation technology we fear that is actually the technology that we need to enable humans to solve the complexity of designing a future for 10 billion people to live sustainably on this planet. So what does this mean for you? For your work, your career, the job you might be looking for, your future of work? Just last week, I finished Yuval Harari's latest book, 21 Lessons for a 21st Century. And in that book, he talks about the 4 C's: critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity. We need those skills in spades. But there's a 5th C, and that's courage. We need courage to decide that we want to make a difference. We want to have impact and the will to go make it happen. We need courage to believe that we have agency to tackle even the most toughest challenges like climate change. We need courage to stop and listen to nascent, even unpopular ideas and create the conditions for them to succeed, as others have done for me. We have to get the next 15 years right if we're going to stay in business. Because business does have the power to either save us or destroy us. Now, I know that sounds dramatic, but I also know that every single person in this room is here because you share that belief, and you know that business is that powerful. You also probably know by now that I have been chasing an addiction to having transformational impact, terrified that my career might actually feel incremental. So today I see it from a slightly different angle. I think the next 15 years will be about rapid incrementalism. What we need more than anything is small changes by everyone as fast as we possibly can. So MBA students, faculty, alumni, business leaders, let's make sure we have so much to celebrate 15 years from today. Thank you.
Wow. Linnell, that was incredible. No, truly incredible. I am not that person. And I have very big shoes to fill here. And I just like to say, Kelly, as I said before, unfortunately is not feeling well and can't be with us. But it also is an opportunity for me to pay accolades to Kelly while she's not here. Kelly Mcelhaney, of course, the founding director of the Center for Responsible Business, and just a pivotal person who's the linchpin for the CRB getting off the ground and running. And in her absence, could I please have a round of applause for Kelly and her foundational work. And then Kelly, though, I think maybe she did this on purpose, Nikita, because you know, I have a problem with you. And I think that Kelly would also. You do too much. So in putting and reading a biography of somebody who does so much, it's what to choose. And here I find myself having to edit down here, but I know you can't get rid of this because this is so important here. So what I'm about to say is just a scratching the surface of what Nikita offers and what she means to this school and far, far beyond. So I have the privilege to introduce Nikita Mitchell. And Nikita T. Mitchell is an infinitely curious business strategist, speaker, and writer. She's also the creator of Above the Bottom Line, which is ranked as one of the best business newsletters by Fortune magazine. Remember this, Above the Bottom Line. I follow you, many of us follow you. It is wonderful. It calls out companies on social and environmental issues that consumers care about. Snarkiness very much included. And through Weekly Insights, Nikita helps readers rethink consumerism and hold corporations accountable from the bottom up. Now, Nikita is currently a senior manager at Cisco, where she's responsible for strategy and planning initiatives for the company's $20 billion in American sales organization. She was cited as Diversity MBA Magazine's top 100 under 50 executive and emerging leaders, and Nikita is a fierce advocate for women's rights. Nikita serves on the board of trustees for Planned Parenthood Northern California and the Watermark Board of Directors. And I'll also say that while Nikita was here at Haas, among many things, she was one of the principals and a leader in the Haas Socially Responsible Investment Fund, HSRIF. And I see a number of really key supporters of HSRIF around here. And hearkening to what Linnell offered, Haas created the environment that these things can be launched, and the CRB was that institutional home and remains as the Haas Socially Responsible Investment Fund. And my sincere thanks to so many of you, a number of you, I see your faces out here, that have been supportive of HSRIF over the years here. With that, Nikita, I'd like to ask you to please come up on the stage. A warm welcome to Nikita Mitchell.
It started on a Friday. It was January 2017, and I sat glued in front of my television as I learned that the 45th President of the United States had just signed an executive order banning citizens from several predominantly Muslim countries from entering the United States. I was struck, frozen. All weekend, I followed the headlines, I followed the tweets. I was just powerless. I felt so powerless reading these headlines. I watched as people showed up in airports across the country protesting, as lawyers showed up, they rallied in order to get individuals who needed any kind of assistance, help. That same weekend, I read an article that I couldn't let go. I found myself reflecting on it. It was about how companies like Starbucks and Exxon and even Apple were speaking out against the immigration ban. And for me, this was so striking because I had never really seen anything like that before. I couldn't let it go. I remember thinking, where else can I get information like this? How can I follow the companies that are speaking up, that have the courage to influence what's happening in the world? I also wondered if there was a way to follow this for other issues I cared about. So being the Berkeley student that I am, I realized it didn't exist, so I'd have to create it. Over the next 2 days, I spent some time building a website, launching a newsletter, and reaching out to anyone that I could think of who might be interested in having this conversation. And within a week, I had a couple hundred subscribers. And they weren't all my mother's friends. That was 2 years ago. And since that time, I have sent a weekly newsletter to individuals like you in this room who want to know how companies are responding to the biggest challenges that we are facing today. I spend my free time reading and researching all the issues that I've always cared about, many issues that you care about, analyzing headlines, and critically examining corporate actions, all with the goal of helping other people make decisions in line with their values. When I think about my journey creating Above the Bottom Line, I naturally think about my time here at Haas. I wish Kelly was here so I could make fun of her, but of course, I took her class, The Business Case for Investing in Women. I also took her class on the business solutions for global trends. I took social investing. I took anything that I could get my hands on that would help me become more informed about how business can play a more positive role in society. I even took a corporate governance class that put me to sleep. I also took a class over at the law school on shareholder activism that was during what should have been my nap time my last semester here. And as Robert already mentioned, I was on the Haas Socially Responsible Investment Fund. It was one of the biggest reasons, honestly, why I came to Haas. And when I showed up on campus, it was my first mission to get placed onto this fund. And it was an incredible experience. We managed a $2.5 million fund in which we invested in stocks based on our belief in that company's social, environmental, and governance practices. It was incredible. And when I think about this time, I think about how far we've come. You know, we, over the last 2 years, since I graduated, it's been about 3 years, but over the past 2 years in particular, we have seen companies engage in conversations around politics and social issues and environmental issues in ways that we've never seen it before. We are in the age of CEO activism, and it's about time. 77% of Americans say that CEOs should speak out about issues, especially when it goes against the values of that company. 60% of employees at America's largest companies, they think that company CEOs should play a more active role in addressing the problems that we see in society. And 50% of Americans believe that CEO activism can influence government decisions. I find that particularly striking. I think what it also says is that we have watched the conversation about corporate responsibility shift faster than ever before from ones about employee volunteerism, from writing checks to nonprofits, to press releases. We've seen it shift from that straight to headlines. Conversations about corporate responsibility are mainstream. People are watching and people are listening. Back in 2017, I watched this unfold with the immigration ban. In what I think is kind of an onion-worthy headline, the columnist for DealBook wrote about CEOs calling one another and trying to figure out how to speak up on the immigration ban. They were so anxious about basically taking a stance so early in the Trump administration, right? It was a kind of scary thing to be tweeted by Trump at that time in particular. But luckily, we saw some CEOs take the lead. We had Tim Cook of Apple, we had Mark Zuckerberg, we also had Howard Schultz of Starbucks speak up and condemn the ban. We also had what might be the most sharp criticism of the ban of all from Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix. He said that the decision was so un-American that it pains us all. The list of CEOs who spoke up after that, it continued to unfold quickly. It just grew longer and longer and longer, and it was really amazing to watch. And we can see now that it was a watershed moment in what we now see as CEO activism. But the headlines continued throughout the year after the immigration ban. One of the first was when the president withdrew, or he at least stated his intent to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. We had CEOs immediately take to Twitter and release press releases about the issue. We had the CEO of GE, Tesla, Goldman Sachs, this was his first ever tweet, by the way, and Disney quickly condemn the decision. Even after that, we had the events in Charlottesville and the president's statements. And Ken Frazier of Merck decided to resign from one of the president's councils. He said that it was a matter of personal conscience, that he felt a responsibility to take a stand against intolerance and extremism. The resignations, they kept rolling in so fast that the president ended up tweeting that he was going to disband the councils altogether. I guess he won that one. After that, we saw the president declare that he was going to end DACA. And we saw a lot of tech companies in particular speak out to defend the Dreamers. These are the Deferred Action Childhood Arrivals program. One of the responses came from the president and chief legal officer of Microsoft. I love this one in particular. He said that if the government was going to deport the Dreamers who were Microsoft employees, they would have to come through them first. It was a powerful statement. And one that, again, was just kind of another headline in the news. That year, these were just the highlights. That year, there were so many issues that CEOs were speaking up about, taking a stance on, that we could spend all day talking about it. But I think what's really important to take away from all of it is a comment from the corner office columnist, David Gellis. He was at the BSR conference, and he said that the role of a CEO no longer is just about balancing a profit and loss statement. What I think is particularly striking is that we are witnessing a new age of responsible business. It's been subtle, I think, in 2018, but it's become more of a phenomenon that I don't think we can ignore, and that's employee activism. Over the past year, we have watched as employees have taken a public stand and demanded that their companies live up to the values that they claim to hold. And quite frankly, as somebody who writes a snarky newsletter, it's been fun to watch. Amazon's came under fire earlier this May because their board of directors, incredibly diverse, rejected a shareholder proposal to create a policy to improve their board's diversity. The employees were not having it. In emails that were shared with the press, people went in. And within a week, guess what? The company had a new policy to improve the board's diversity. Also, tech employees at Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, they've been really fighting their companies on their proposals and bids for the Department of Defense contracts. And I think one particularly big win was Google employees won in terms of having their company withdraw a bid to work with the Department of Defense. But we still see Microsoft and Amazon employees in particular working to fight the company in pitching work on AI, artificial intelligence, to the Department of Defense. But nothing, in my opinion, has been more important than this moment. On November 1st, at 11 a.m., 20,000 Google employees walked out all over the world. They were protesting the company's gross mismanagement and protection of executives that had been accused of sexual misconduct. I think it's time. I think we have been overlooking this group of individuals who are going to shape corporate responsibility over the next 15 years. When you look at why people are choosing to work for companies, it's not just about where they're taking a stance or how they're taking a stance. After pay, because we need to get money, people are looking at the reputation of the companies, the ethics. And what's particularly striking is more than two times as many respondents say that ethics and the reputation of a company matters more than the political position it has taken on an issue. And when we look at consumers, 47% of Americans are less likely to buy from a company if they do not believe that their actions are in line with their words. And my favorite part, 65% of them want receipts. They want to find out if you are being true to your word. And if you ask me, there's no greater source of truth for those who are seeking it than employees. The word of mouth is powerful, and headlines, as we've seen from the Me Too movement, is even more powerful. So, what I ask of you today, as you go forward, I ask that you do not avert your gaze. that you continue to keep watch, that you stay informed and you're vigilant, because it is up to us to hold companies responsible from the outside in. And if you want to stay informed, feel free to take out your phone, abovethebottomline.com, subscribe. I send a newsletter every week, and I'd love to hear your take, what issues you want to learn more about. And more importantly, if you'd like to support Above the Bottom Line, there's a link for that on my website too. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jo McNess, and I am a former CRB Executive Director. It's really great to see so many of you in the room that I recognize. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Mr. Kyle Rudinsky. And I remember the first time, so this is not your traditional intro, just for the record. I remember the first time that I met you. You were applying for Center for Responsible Business Fellowship, remember? And this is what I remember, 3 things from this conversation. The first thing is he had just cycled, like as in bicycled, from Boston all the way to Santa Barbara, not for his health, but because he wanted to raise money for affordable housing. So that was the first thing I remember about him. The second thing I remember about him is he had a super cool mom, as many good leaders do. And she was actually an exec at the Environmental Protection Agency, right? Yeah, and she had definitely influenced Kyle's trajectory and his pathway to Haas. I knew that. The third really interesting thing that I remember from that conversation is that you'd had a stint at the US Department of Energy where at the ripe old age of, 20-some, yeah, you was managing a multi-million-dollar portfolio for the Sunshot Initiative. And those of you who are not familiar with that, it was an initiative that was investing in high-risk, high-reward startups that were intended to drive down the cost of solar energy. Small thing. During his time at Haas, this is where it gets really good, I remember you because you definitely embraced the question the status quo defining principle. And you had a number of firsts, I would say, at Haas. For those of you who know me, I'm someone who asks for a fair amount of feedback. And oftentimes I don't get it. You know, I get the, oh yeah, it's great, you know. So I asked Kyle, as our new Center for Responsible Business Fellow. This is the first Peterson lecture series. Give us your feedback, Kyle. So I found this email. I don't have a slide for it, but I found it. I got 4 bullet points, 7-paragraph email. It included feedback on the venue, Kelly's intro, and best yet, it was feedback on what you considered to be the suboptimal methodology that the speaker had used in his talk on global megatrends. Anyway, it was this question the status quo mentality and approach that I think actually garnered you the first GSI position for Kelly's, as a man, the first GSI position for Kelly's brand new Women in Business class. Indeed, your strategic thinking, your leading edge thinking has touched many firms and not-for-profits, Dow Chemical, Ernst & Young, Tesla, Urban Forest, and most recently, of course, Levi Strauss & Company, where he is the Director of Strategy for Sustainability. During his time at Haas, Kyle regularly called himself K-Rud. He referred to me as J-Mac, and he referred to Kelly as K-Mac. He also referred to us at the Center for Responsible Business as his CRB family, and it is with great pleasure that I would like to invite you back up to the stage and to become back your CRB family again. Thank you.
I don't know what to say to that. That's Thank you, Joe. Thank you all for coming here to celebrate the 15 years of the CRB. Well, Nikita is just poise embodied. I'm ADHD embodied. And I've done this since I was a kid. And so my talk is really about the journey and my personal journey towards towards responsible business, and how I think companies over the last 4 decades have kind of had a similar journey, just same sequence, different time horizons. And what I think is important to note is that companies are made up of people, and people are going on their individual journeys throughout. And so as we're going through our own individual journeys, that's what will help push companies farther. And so it usually starts with a bit of selfishness and a bit of kind of fun where you think you're the center of attention, things are going great for you, and it's maybe not working out so much for your brothers or others. But eventually you get to this point of maturity, and over time you harmonize a little bit and things get better. And for me, my journey to being a better person and focusing on responsible business really started about 15 years ago with this book, which I did not read. Because what high schooler does their summer reading? And I was in my US history class, and a quiz got passed out, and I was freaking out because I had not done the reading, and I was definitely about to fail. And an assistant comes in the room and goes to Mr. Translito and whispers something in his ear, leaves the room. He quietly asks us to put our pencils down, and he turns on the TV. And this is what we watched. And we watched the second plane hit the second tower, and we watched the towers fall, and we watched all this stuff. And it was not just disconcerting for what it was, but it was disconcerting personally because where I grew up, a lot of people had family in government. Where I grew up was in Northern Virginia, and our high school is here, and the CIA is 2,000 feet away. People were being pulled from the classes, people didn't know what was going on with their parents. It was scary, and thankfully my parents were okay. But the next day, we had no school and didn't know what to do. And early enough in the day, my friend shows up at my door and says, we need to do something. So what we did was we rallied a few dozen classmates. We did something that was way less formal than this, and we ended up raising $20,000 for the American Red Cross in 2 days. It was a step in the right direction because we didn't know what to do. And we said, okay, there are people nearby, they have money, let's give money away. And that's kind of where corporations really started in the 1980s. Right? Corporate philanthropy was very much driven by executives who might have been touched by an issue or had some sort of big impact that they said, I can contribute. Right? A CEO's husband might have pancreatic cancer, and all of a sudden that company might be supporting pancreatic cancer research, even if the company makes playing cards. Right? It's about giving money away. And this is good, and I don't want to denigrate philanthropy. We need more of this because it fills gaps that are out there. Right? But it also doesn't always solve the root causes. And for me, when I think about what are the root causes, as businesses and as companies, a lot of those root causes rest within the companies and the systems and the structures in which we operate. Which led me to my second part of my journey, and sort of the second part of what companies have gone through. And that's what we heard about earlier with that CSR phase, right? 1990s is more driven by, not executives this time, but more corporate communications shops. It's how do we have a license to operate? How do we be good community citizens? And this comes in with, getting involved, with volunteering, with all those sort of matching gifts that we see. And so as Joe mentioned, that's what I did after I graduated college. I went and I biked across the country, and I built homes with Habitat for Humanity, and I raised money, and I volunteered. But on this journey, 4,000 miles over a few months, you have a lot of time to think. And I realized that I wanted to do something different. And I wasn't quite sure what that would be. And so I kind of went back to my roots. And I grew up in a national park. And Joe mentioned my mom worked for the Environmental Protection Agency. And so I realized, what good are all of these human squabbles that we have if we don't have clean air, clean water, outdoor spaces, and the ability to feed ourselves? All that other stuff goes away, right? The planet was here before us. It's going to be here after us. Our job is to make it livable so that we can thrive. And I thought, how do I make an impact in this area? What do I do? And I thought, business, kind of greedy, a little insidious at times. And I thought this was just kind of clown talk. This wasn't for me, right? And so I kicked off the next phase of my journey, which I think is the next phase of what companies went through. It's more about sustainable development. This is where we started seeing companies with supply chain sustainability teams, where it's saying, how can we make the same stuff using less? How can we become more eco-efficient? And really, it's about doing less harm, right? And for me, there's this guy, and he inspired me a little bit. He talked about hope and change, and I thought, oh, this is a good thing, I could do this. And so I went to the Department of Energy, and I was investing in solar startups, just like Joe was talking about, trying to scale them up, and I don't know why they gave me millions of dollars, but it worked out, thank goodness. But in my journey here, I realized that there was a big roadblock. And I should have seen it coming, because it's kind of always been this way. There's a lot of issues with politics, and a lot of our policymakers don't do what's right. They don't do what's in the best interest of social good. And for me, I realized that I had to make another pivot. I had to really think about what is a way that I can make positive change and without having to worry about this nonsense. And that brought me here. I had the option of doing a Fulbright in Chile, working on solar energy. I said, I don't know if that's for me. I only found one business school that I wanted to attend, and I applied to one business school, and thanks, Stephanie, for letting me in. And thanks to Joe and team, because if it weren't for the CRB fellowship, I definitely would have gone and done a different path, right? I think it's centers like this that really embody the entire culture of the community here at Berkeley, not just at Haas, but at the community writ large. And it's one that is progressive, it's one that is forward-looking, and it's one that is making change that we want to see in the world. And so while I was here, I rolled up my sleeves and got my hands dirty a little bit, and had a good time, but I learned everything I possibly could learn about how businesses work, did a lot of consulting projects, tried to figure out what is it that makes businesses tick so that I can make changes, and had a meandering path, but ended up at Levi's. And since I've been at Levi's, I've really kind of been thinking about how businesses really behave badly. They cheat on environmental controls. They cheat consumers. And they're potentially cheating democracy, right? And when companies are doing good, or at least when they're purporting to do good, it's often a token situation. I don't know if this is going to solve racial injustice in the US, but it's certainly not helping with the real issue, which is diabetes, right? So when I think about this phase of sustainable development, I don't feel great about it. And I don't feel great about it because the data says not to feel great about it. The data says that there's going to be millions of climate refugees in the next decade, that there's going to be a 40% freshwater shortfall in the next decade, that we're going to have an increase in food demand by 30% in the next decade. And we're beginning to feel these risks a lot more acutely. We're seeing our underwater forests disappearing. We don't know what that's going to do to our ecology and to our fisheries. We've all experienced this recently with the fires here. And of course, hurricanes are getting more and more destructive, and we're not rebuilding the places that are in most need, like Puerto Rico. And I think what separates the center and why we need it so much is that most people aren't caring. They might make some changes to their lives, but they're going about their business. We have a lot of consumers out there. We have a lot of people who are distracted. We have a lot of people who are just not looking out to the horizon at what's coming. Life seems fine here. I don't care about what's out there. Which brings me to the phase that I think we're entering now, and why I think the Center for Responsible Business is so critical. And this is one in which we're looking at more circular models and more regenerative models. This is no longer just about giving money away. We need to do that. It's not just about getting involved and putting our time and effort into our communities. We need to do that. It's not just about becoming more efficient at what we do so we can provide for everybody around the world. We need to do that. It's really about doing good. And so that's what I try to do. I work at Levi's. I go around trying to pitch these ideas and use our company as an example of what good can look like and how we can take a 165-year-old company, transform it, and then be a beacon for others to follow. And for me, this is especially acute because in the sustainable development phase, we don't really tackle the big questions, which is this. The US is 4% of the world's population. And so if you like predicting slides, you'll know that this is coming next. We consume 25% of the world's resources. Our economy is 70% driven on that consumption. And that consumption is fueled by $21 trillion of federal debt that is levered into state debt, levered into municipal debt, and levered into private debt, and levered into consumer debt. We are far outstripping our resources. We're outstripping it at such a pace that it will take approximately 4 Earths to be able to meet the needs of people today at the rate at which the US consumes. And in apparel, this unchecked consumption is growing. We make about 100 billion garments a year in the apparel industry. 60 billion of them are either burned or buried within a year, incinerated or to landfill within 1 year. The rate of consumption is increasing, the rate of ownership is decreasing. And so there are a lot of things that we can do about this, and there are a lot of things that we need to do about this. And I'll talk about a few things that we're working on at Levi's. The first is we're rethinking how do we design products to be better from the start. How do you use recycled materials in a product design that can be recyclable at the end? So as an example, the jacket that I'm wearing has 3 kinds of recycled cotton. The entire thing is made of cotton, including the buttons, which means that it can be recycled on the back end and turned to a new garment later on. It's also designed to last for decades, not weeks. Another thing we're taking on is how do you extend the life of products, right? It's one thing to say, hey, we care about the environment, you should really repair your jeans, repair your jacket, whatever it might be. But that's not where every consumer is. So the lens that we're looking at it through is how do you customize and love what you wear and live in it longer, right? It doesn't matter if consumers believe what we believe, it matters if they take the actions we want them to take, and this is an entirely new business model for us to explore. For the first time, we are delving into the secondhand market. The best pair of jeans that we can sell is the one we don't have to make from scratch, right? Levi's, unlike almost any other product, hold their value. They get better looking, better feeling, and more expensive over time. Pretty good business model. And the other thing we're doing is really looking at, okay, how do we take all of that waste that's being created and transform it into new products, right? We're partnering with other entrepreneurs and innovators to figure out how can we turn waste into brand new denim. And what's great about this is others are joining us. We're seeing small startups come up with this whole idea of buy less but buy better, right? We're seeing known companies that we know redesigning and rethinking their entire operating model and their entire business model. But ultimately, when it comes to consumption, I'm glad that Kai's following up because this is the right message. Don't buy stuff that you don't need, right? And if you buy something, be willing to invest in it for a long time. And so what heartens me about the future and about where we're going in this sort of circular and regenerative space is that we have a center here that is all about questioning the status quo. And what this means to me is not just being a pain in the ass, right? It's about thinking about, is there a better way? How might we do this better? How might we improve upon this? Why should I accept what's been given to me just because that's the way it's been done? Everything that has been done thus far has been created by people. Everything that we can do in the future will also be created by people. And to me, that's sort of the heart of this virtue. So I couldn't be more grateful to be associated, affiliated with the Center for Responsible Business, for Laura kicking it off, for Kelly being our first director here, for Joe with your leadership when I was here, and Robert really building into the future. It's an incredible community that we have that brings together both students that are going to be the future of business, as well as the practitioners today. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle, very much. We could say a lot of things about Kyle. One thing is he owns a very large collection of very bright shoes. And I will also say, please do help yourself in the back if you need a drink. Please do get up. And I would like to remind you to pose your questions, CRB Beyond 15. And we will be opening up in just a few minutes to some of those questions. Now, Kyle, your talk here couldn't have been a better prelude to Kai. And Kai Hinson is an individual. I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to introduce you, but more than that, just to have gotten to know you and to see what you do and the impact that you have in the world here. And Kyle mentioned this concept of regenerative. And Kai, you embody that. And Kai discovered her passion for regenerative agriculture while working on farms and researching local food systems in Santa Barbara County. In 2011, Kai moved to Oahu to co-found a regenerative farm and educational event center in Waimanalo. She helped draft and lobby for legislation to support family farmers using natural practices as the state secretary for the Hawaii Farmers Union. Now, most recently, Kai graduated from here at Haas in 2017 and joined Patagonia Provisions team as product and sourcing manager. And Patagonia Provisions, of course, Patagonia has a food company, and it's Patagonia Provisions, and launched with the understanding that if Patagonia wants to have deeper impact in the world, there's no better place to go than food when it comes to issues of climate change, et cetera. And that's precisely where Kai is. Now, her work involves building new supply chains, developing product, strategic granting, and implementing regenerative organic standards across the provisions line. And I also want to say that Kai is such a wonderful example for the incredible interest and excitement that we have around food here at Haas that has grown organically over the years and has been cultivated by this wonderful gardener that we have in our midst, Will Rosenzweig. And as a result, yes, indeed. And I know a number of you are coming directly from Will's class, and it's such a great example of the institutional home that the CRB is, where these things can flourish, we can launch, we can plant seeds, and they can grow. And so we established a sustainable food initiative just this last year with the leadership of Will and so many great students and former students like Kai with your efforts. And so this is just another example of the impact that the CRB can have. Now, Kai will be discussing her path into agriculture, why she came to Haas, and Patagonia's major efforts around food, and the future of our food system. With that, please, a warm welcome, Kai Hinson.
Thanks for that introduction, and thank you all for being here today. I get a lot of questions how I got started in agriculture. I developed my passion for social and environmental responsibility as a co-host for Discovery Kids Channel TV show. At 17, my mom let me move to New York by myself, join a production company, and travel around the world investigating different environmental and ecological issues. We traveled to Antarctica, Belize, Easter Island, China, Inner Mongolia, and Argentina. And in each place, we met with scientists, local community members, fishermen, and farmers. And for me, through this experience, agriculture became the intersection of so many complicated issues: environmental issues, political issues, social, economic. And it's where I wanted to make my impact. When I came back to California and I started my undergraduate studies in Santa Barbara, I started working on organic farms. And I loved it. I caught the bug. When I graduated from school, I had an incredible opportunity. 2 angel investors approached me to start my own farm in Hawaii. Sight unseen, I arrived in late 2011 and took a shovel out to one of the most beautiful parts of the property: flat, grassy, a farmer's dream. Unfortunately, I made a terrifying discovery that day. I started digging into the soil and had to return a few minutes later with a pickaxe, and I literally and figuratively hit rock bottom. The soil had been completely excavated by the previous owners of the property and backfilled in with a parking lot, covered up with sand and turf, which made a great place to do dressage for horses, But suddenly, I had no idea how to farm on a piece of property that didn't have soil. This launched me into my investigation and experimentation into regenerative organic agriculture. I started studying agroforestry, biodynamic methods, Korean natural farming, and going back to organic principles, the real heart and soul of the organic movement. And in a very short period of time, through gathering food waste from local grocery stores, breweries, and tree trimmers, we started building compost, building soil, and within less than a year, we were able to plant into that same area that didn't have soil before. The farm began to thrive. We began to go to farmers markets, develop accounts with restaurants, chefs, and caterers. And one of the things that I think was most important to me was I had loved agriculture and I had no idea about the kind of impact that regenerative practices could make on land. And so we started an educational center at the farm, bringing in tours, planning workshops, having farm-to-table dinners and events and festivals to bring people onto the property to start to understand what regenerative organic agriculture could look like and the potential it could have. During the next 4 years of farming in Hawaii, I became involved in policy work with the Hawaii Farmers Union. I did work on legislation and tried to lobby for incentives to reward these farmers who were using natural practices, regenerative practices, and wanting to move away from a chemical model of farming. On one hand, we have extractive, chemical, conventional farming that depletes the soil year over year in crop cycle after crop cycle. In the middle of the spectrum, we have sustainable agriculture that works hard to maintain the health of the soil and not do more harm. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have regenerative organic agriculture, and the potential there is huge. It can draw down carbon in a single crop cycle. It can revitalize soils, restore microbiological populations, and it can create nutritious food. It can be a solution to the climate crisis. And so I became very frustrated with the pace of policy work, and I decided I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to work for the private sector. I wanted to work for a company that was interested in shifting the agricultural paradigm to a more regenerative model, that could understand the value of regenerative practices and the potential for the climate, for the planet, for the people, and to develop a market for farmers to move toward a more regenerative model. I also, like Kyle, only applied to one business school. I only applied to Haas, and a large part of that was because of the Center for Responsible Business. It was a place where I saw businesses coming with some of their most pressing challenges, wanting desperately to communicate and engage with students to solve these issues. I loved the idea that the center had created a space where open and honest communication and transparency was valued, and where and a destination for companies like Patagonia, Levi's, and Microsoft. My first year at Haas was the first year of the Patagonia case competition. And I had already known that I wanted to be involved with the CRB. So I went to Robert's office for one of his coffee chats. And I told him, you know, I started recruiting for consulting, and they said that it was really cool that I was a farmer, but they didn't know what to do with me. Literally was told that. And I'm really grateful to Robert because he pushed me, and the rest of the CRB team pushed me to stay true to my values and to stay true to my path and to continue down this road of sustainable business. There we go. So Patagonia has a food company. but I get a lot of questions. Why did Patagonia get involved in agriculture, in food? But they've been involved in agriculture for a very long time, starting with the organic cotton movement. And ultimately, the company has always wanted to make an impact through business to fight the climate crisis. And regenerative organic agriculture does just that. The Rodale Institute published a paper stating that with regenerative organic practices, we could potentially sequester more carbon than we're emitting year after year. They said that we could potentially reverse climate change with these practices. It's not very high tech, and it doesn't cost a ton of money to do this. But it requires an entire systems change. I'm so grateful to the CRB for introducing me to a company that wanted to have an impact in agriculture, and particularly food. There's a few Patagonia jackets in here, and our founders really believe that some people may only buy 2 or 3 jackets in their lifetime, but people eat every day. And to really address the issues of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture, we had to become part of the problem. I think one of the most exciting things that I learned through my time at Haas and being part of the CRB is that it really invites companies like Patagonia to come engage with students and have the opportunity to crowdsource solutions to some of the biggest problems they're facing. The case competitions are not stagnant. We really do implement the solutions that students propose. And so a lot of my work actually revolves around the second case competition that happened here at Haas around regenerative organic agriculture. We asked students, how can we scale this effectively? And one of the main initiatives that came out of this was the Regenerative Organic Alliance, co-founded by Patagonia, Dr. Bronner's, and the Rodale Institute. This certification is just one part of the solution. Patagonia has made a commitment to building a new system of agriculture, to moving toward a more regenerative model. And I think that the CRB has been influential in making this happen and facilitating the engagement, not just with students, but also partners and other corporations who are interested in coming along this journey. One of the things that I do at Provisions, I manage our strategic grants, and I also work on our corporate grants council for food and fiber. We realize that it's going to take blended capital and new partnerships and new ways of thinking to accomplish our mission to create a more regenerative food system. Over the last 2 years, we've granted over $2 million to small grassroots organizations and nonprofits who are doing work in this field. Everything from empowering the next wave of organic female farmers to researching perennial crops that can sequester more carbon in a single year than an annual variety. Our venture arm has worked to make strategic investments in regional economies to stimulate the new manufacturing and systems approach to regenerative agriculture. It's really going to take quite a few people to do this. And I have students ask me all the time, how can I get involved in regenerative ag? How can I become, how can I work at Provisions? How can I work at another food company that's doing this work? And the truth is, it's going to take a lot more than food companies to make this change. It's going to take financial institutions, nonprofits, people all across sectors and industries and levels of community to enact this change. I feel lucky to have been connected to Haas and the CRB, and we continue at Patagonia to lean on Robert and the CRB to guide us in our next steps in this journey toward regenerative organic ag. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Could I have, now that we've had our speakers, please a warm round of applause for all of our wonderful speakers here. And I would also, before we go, we have some questions from Twitter. So you're not off the hook yet. We're going to pose a few questions here, and I will take this microphone and run it around here. But before I do that, I do want to recognize a few other very important people that make the CRB what it is. And that, of course, is we have wonderful student advisory board members. So please, our student advisory board members, if you'd kindly stand who are here, please. Student advisory board members. And now please stay standing here. Please stay standing. And in addition, our CRB senior advisory board members. We have a couple of them that have been able to make it, so please kindly stand. Thank you very much. And also, HSRIF, the Haas Socially Responsible Investment Fund, has been so instrumental here with the CRB, teaching our students, training our students, as well as a revenue stream for the CRB to keep the lights on. And I know we have at least one advisory board member as well as you, Scott. So Larry, please stand. Anyone else from the HSRIF Senior Advisory Board also. Thank you all so very much. The CRB is such a collection of so many people. And now we have some questions that have been posed here via Twitter. So I'm going to take a few minutes here and run around and pose some questions here. Chatham House rules, all right, will be in effect here. And I'm going to move over to this microphone, if I could. All right. Now, this was a question for any of the speakers. So please indicate if you'd like to take this one on. And the comment question from Twitter was, conversations about corporate sustainability may be mainstream, but are we any closer to moving business as usual away from unsustainable business models based on overconsumption and to actual contributions to sustainability? Who might like to take that? Kyle? If you kindly stand up.
I'd say there's been a lot of progress in the last 20 years in particular. I think there's been incredible movements towards much more sustainable business models. But writ large, our economy runs on a take, make, waste approach. And even though recycling has been really pushed in the United States, for instance, since the early 70s, we still only recycle about 1/3 of our overall municipal waste. So the growth of people in terms of population, as well as the growth of business opportunities and the accessibility to start businesses and to make products, is far outstripping the resources that can sustain them. So that's kind of, I think, what the macro data show. But also, to me, what's really heartening is that in the last 5 to 8 years in particular, the number of disruptive startups and disruptive business models that have entered the fray and entered the market and questioned what they can do about this sort of consumptive model has grown exponentially. There are people that are looking at leasing models for clothes. We all know about companies like Rent the Runway. There are a lot of different models out there that are beginning to develop. And so I would say, if you're a big old company, kind of like Levi's, one thing that we're doing is looking over our shoulder and then looking ahead and saying, okay, what can we do better? How can we learn from these small competitors, and what can we do to make sure that we're shifting our model as well over time and using innovation as a real lever? So I would say that it's a mixed bag. But the macro data is still, it's challenging. It's challenging.
Kyle, thank you. And Nikita, I have a question for you. And this is a question that came in. You have successfully married personal passion with purpose in your career. How can a student looking to launch impact-minded careers do the same? What advice would you give to our current students here, please?
Well, thank you for calling me successful. I appreciate that. I think it's a journey. It's interesting because it could be perceived that I've successfully done that, but I think every day is kind of a journey on how to do it. I would start with the advice that you mentioned, though, going where you're respected. I feel like when I was at Haas trying to figure out where to go, I knew I didn't want to go in a traditional CSR department, right? I didn't want to do something that wasn't focused on the core of the business. I always wanted to be in operations or sales. And that's where I sit. My job has nothing to do with corporate responsibility. I think if I was to talk to my boss about it, he'd be like, oh, that's cute. Have you talked to our CSR person? So I think for me, I'm always looking for how to do it. My main goal, and I would say use this as advice, decide what your goal is. What is your objective? And my main goal in my career is to become a really strong businesswoman, to be able to have the skills to operate a business successfully. And as I move forward in my career, being able to bring my knowledge about corporate sustainability into my decision-making process as I sit at more tables, right? So I would say, one, go where you're respected, where you have the opportunity to use your full skill set. Two, decide what your career objectives are. What part of the business do you want to sit in? And then stay engaged in these kinds of conversations so that you can find and leverage opportunities to bring them all together.
Thank you, Nikita. And Kai, I'm going to go to you on this one also. A related question, because you do work for Patagonia, and I heard that in their last opening, Patagonia had 15,000 applicants. It wasn't quite that much, but it was over 1,000. So with that, Kai, it doesn't really matter once you get up to that number. If it's 1,000 or 15,000, it's the same level. So Kai, what's your suggestion for students looking to work with companies at the forefront of sustainable business like Patagonia?
Thank you. Yes, I got very lucky. When I applied for the internship, Patagonia was looking for somebody with agricultural supply chain experience in Hawaii. So I'm not joking. So I think one of the things that I really believe in is just staying true to your values, stay true to your passion. I love what Lynette said about not going to a place where you have to hit your head against the wall, but really finding people in your tribe, whether that's one person in a company or an entire startup or a nonprofit organization. I think for me, my parents were terrified that I wanted to go into farming. My dad grew up in Oklahoma, and his family was a banker in an agricultural area, and he understood how hard farming was. And I think I could never have predicted my path to where I am now, but I think by just continuing on and doing what you truly believe in, you'll find the companies and the leaders within them that are excited to work with you.
Thank you, Kai, very much. And Linnell, if I could pose a question, a very broad kind of question to you, and you indicated this in the comments that you offered, but if just to put you on the spot, to really looking ahead these next 15 years, and I want to get some advice from you. What should we be doing at the Center for Responsible Business?
Well, I said that I would be designing a climate center. My goodness, that is a broad talk. A broad topic. I have to say, continue doing what you're doing, because it seems like there are so many important issues to so many different people. And to the first question, which Kyle answered really nicely, we have a lot of progress to do, right? And we are, I think my answer to that question is we have a much greater awareness of the problem, for sure. And we have a much greater desire on the part of CEOs to do something. They just don't know what to do. We don't know a circular, regenerative, actually Paul was writing that in 1994 in that book. We don't know how to do it. Right? And so the more we can teach people to experiment and explore and to figure it out as we go, I think that's my best advice, other than what I've already talked about. So, and I think somebody responded to me on Twitter about climate change, and you're right, there's lots and lots of issues that are equally important, from biodiversity to all these others. And so I think it's finding what you are most passionate about, because all of these issues matter. Business does need to step up and change, and it's going to take people like us to drive that change. So.
Thank you very much, Linnell. And I just have a couple of parting comments to say here, and then there's some desserts back there. So we'll open up, and we have until 2 o'clock in here, so please would encourage you to continue the conversations. And I wanted to go back to this, just to emphasize. This is our strategy at the Center for Responsible Business. Students at the center of everything. And our mission there, to develop leaders who redefine business for a sustainable future. Now, as I look ahead here, and with the great benefit of having people like Linnell and all the other speakers here, and so many wonderful people, and a leader like Laura Tyson here at our disposal, and the students and the energy, looking ahead to the next 15 years of the CRB, this notion of global challenges and opportunities. And I am, quite frankly, surprised, pleasantly surprised, at the uptick on the Sustainable Development Goals as being a framework that's actually bringing some people together who otherwise wouldn't have gotten together. However, when I compare what I see in the United States vis-a-vis elsewhere in the world, Northern Europe, for example, the discussions are in their infancy here. So we have some opportunity. I think Haas and the CRB has a great opportunity to be a platform to usher in serious, sincere discussion about the Sustainable Development Goals, and more than that, action, where we can use this as a collaborative framework. So it fits with our strategy perfectly, because in that upper left-hand corner, we start by looking at global challenges and opportunities, and the SDGs are the world's greatest materiality assessment. So let's use that framework, looking forward with for the Center for Responsible Business. And we couple that. Strategy is much about saying what you're not going to do. We need to focus on what are the strengths of Berkeley, where we can really move the needle. So this is a combination for the CRB when we say, what sort of focus area do we want to have, right down to what sort of talk do we want to facilitate. The marriage of global challenges and opportunities with Berkeley's strength, and of course our students. There needs to be demand from our students or the potential to excite demand. We listen to our students, but we're also out there in the world and try to lead a little bit too. It's that sort of iteration. So this is how we determine what we're going to be doing to determine our areas of focus, is at the top there. Now, how do we resource what we do? That is very, very much, companies have been so important, and you've heard from a number of them here today. Levi's in particular and Patagonia have been core supporters, both in terms of their time, but also their financial resources. And we're an entirely self-funded center, and we need to keep the lights on. We have a tiny, tiny staff. We rely upon a lot of student work, but still, we need a bit of a budget in order to do what we do. And so companies have played such a role in resourcing us. Students, as I mentioned, we drive everything with our students. The Patagonia Case Competition, that's a student-run competition. We do so much with our students as far as being resources, but also we see that as great opportunities for our students. But I want to point attention here to that lower left-hand side here. Individuals. We need the support of individuals, and many of you in the room, there are a number of you, have supported the CRB with your individual giving. And this is where we're looking to cultivate the CRB sustaining sponsors throughout this academic year. And I again want to say, please see me after this event to continue the conversation on that. Individuals are so incredibly helpful for the CRB because you actually allow us discretion to try things out, to do things where maybe there isn't the immediate business case. Companies, oftentimes, we so value our company partnerships, but we also need to demonstrate value creation to the company, whereas individuals allow us some discretion to say, you know what, I believe in the work you do, and hopefully you've seen impact that we've had, evidence of impact that we've had here. Because that is our strategy. We believe that if we bring the global challenges and opportunities, combine it with Berkeley's strength, putting the students at the center of everything, getting companies here on campus, connecting with individuals, that by doing that here on campus, we're going to have the effect of you find folks going out in the world and having the real impact on the world. And that's also what we wanted to share with you today. We also need to show evidence of that impact in the world, because that is our theory of change. And I hope that you've seen here some evidence by these incredible stories that we have today of the impact that the CRB has had over the last 15 years and what we intend to do with your support to have in the coming 15 years. So with that, there are a couple people that I really need to say thank you so much for making today possible. And that is, I'm looking at this fine individual right here, Emily Pellissier. Please stand, Emily. Our program manager, who's the individual that ran point on pulling today together, as well as these 15 stories of impact that are coming together so wonderfully. And Emily, of course, wherever, I don't see Dara, she's probably out there working, right? Where are you, Dara? Dara, please. Mackenzie, please stand, Dara. And Dara, we couldn't do what we do without you. And we're also so fortunate to have another member of our team, our associate director and the newest member of the CRB family, Saren Pendleton-Knoll, our associate director, and her beautiful child. And I heard that lovely crying out. It sounds lovely to my ears because it's a healthy set of lungs here. So thank you so much, Saren, for joining us here. Emily, have I forgotten anything before we turn people loose for desserts? Time for cake, everyone. Thank you so much.